A pleasant evening to all. A pleasant evening to all. On behalf of the management of JMJ College for Women Tenali, I, Ms. K. Arunodaya, lecturer in physics, gladly welcome you all for this sixth day of one-week national webinar from FDP on history and its relevance to present scenario. Let us commence our webinar with a prayer song seeking God's divine blessings.
As we gather in this place today, Holy Spirit, come and have your way. Have your way. As we lay aside our own desires, sweep across our hearts with holy fire and have your way. This is your house, it's your home. We welcome you, Lord, we welcome you. This is your house, it's your home. We welcome you today. As we offer up our hearts and lives, let them be a living sacrifice. Have your way. Be glorified in everything we do. Yes, Lord. Be glorified in everything we say. And have your way. This is your house, it's your home. We welcome you, Lord, we welcome you. This is your house, it's your home. We welcome you today. As we pray, oh Lord, draw near. It's your voice we long to hear. Oh, we long to hear from you, 'cause this is your house, it's your home. We welcome you, Lord, we welcome. This is your house, it's your home. We welcome you today.
Before we commence the session, I would like to give you a few instructions. Dear participants, please mute your audio and switch off your video throughout the webinar in order to avoid inconvenience. If you have any questions during the presentation of resource person, please post your questions in the chat box. The queries and questions will be clarified at the end of the presentation. Thank you for your kind cooperation. I cordially welcome Dr. Sister Theresa Magade, the correspondent of our college, Dr. Sister Shiny KP, the principal, today's eminent speaker, Dr. Dolly Thomas, Associate Professor, Stella Maris College, Chennai, and all the participants across the country to this webinar cum Faculty Development Program organized by the Department of History, JMJ College for Women, Tenali. It's an honor for me to introduce a highly respected figure, a person of exceptional expertise who is nothing but our today's resource person, Dr. Dolly Thomas, who will be discussing on the topic relevance of history with reference to the pre-colonial and colonial India. Dr. Dolly Thomas is an associate professor and former head of the Department of History, Director, Center for Women's Studies, Stella Maris College, Chennai. Dr. Dolly Thomas has been a faculty of the Department of History since June 1996. In June 2001, she became the Associate NCC Officer of Stella Maris College, Chennai. As NCC officer, she has won some awards. She won an English Proficiency Award during her undergraduate program at Stella Maris College, Chennai. She won a gold medal during her MA History at Madras Christian College. She completed her PhD from Loyola College in 2015. She actively contributes to national and international journals. Her research interests are in economic history, human rights, and history of Madras. Since 2022, Dr. Dolly Thomas is a member of the Academic Council, University of Madras. Dr. Thomas is a member of the examination boards of several prestigious colleges like Madras Christian College, Loyola College, Women's Christian College, Ethiras College, Presidency College, Queen Mary's College, etc. She is a member of the Board of Studies for Queen Mary's College, Madras Christian College, Women's Christian College, JBS, and Loyola College. She has served on the staff selection panel at Madras Christian College and JBAS. She has been on the academic audit team at Loyola College, Women's Christian College, and JBAS. She has been a resource person for the students of Davidson College, North Carolina, USA, for their annual semester in India program conducted by Madras Christian College. She is the campus coordinator for Concordia College, New York, and Trinity Western University, Canada. She has served as resource person for tour guide training organized by IITTM, Ministry of Tourism, and Kendriya Vidyalaya. She has also been invited as chief guest resource person, judge, and panelist for several programs. Her book publications include The New Millennium Textbook in History, Standard 6, Macmillan 2000, and has published a chapter in S. Muthaya edition, Madras, a 400-year record of the first city of modern India, the land, the people, and their governance, Palaniyappa Brothers, August 2008. She was the project leader for a project on heritage and conservation during the period 2014 to 15 and co-project leader for a project on promotion of culture, heritage, and folklore of Tamil Nadu for sustainable development during the period 2016 to 18, both of which was sponsored by APCHIA. As part of the second project, she was co-author of a monograph titled A Glimpse into the Folklore, Culture and Heritage of Tamil Nadu 2016. She was selected to attend the APCHIA-sponsored Training for Leadership in Higher Education in Asia 2015. From August 2013 to June 2023, Ms. Dolly Thomas was the head of the Department of History. She was instrumental in initiating two undergraduate departments, BWOP Tourism and Hospitality and BA Tourism and Travel Management. Since June 2023, she has been appointed as Director, Center for Women's Studies. Now, she is an Associate Professor in Stella Maris College, Chennai. We are fortunate to have an excellent and experienced guest speaker. I believe that today's webinar will provide a platform to discuss and acquire new insights on the topic relevance of history with reference to the pre-colonial and colonial India. Now, I invite Dr. Dolly Thomas to address our esteemed participants of the webinar. Welcome you, madam.
Thank you, Ms. Aruna. Am I audible? Is it all clear? Is it clear?
Madam, please increase volume, madam.
Volume has to be higher. Okay. Is it better now?
Okay, madam.
I hope it's better now. Okay, so good afternoon, friends. Good afternoon, Ms. Janama, head of the department. She was the one who contacted me. I would also like to thank the members of the management of JMJ College. I was very curious about this college, so I had Googled. You have few days back when I was before I started preparing my PPT, I googled about JMJ College. And I was very happy to see the photographs which are available online. And I hope maybe someday I'll get to visit it. I've never been to Tenali. I'm supposing Tenali is named after Tenali Raman. Is that how it is? Is it named after Tenali Raman? I'm sure it's an interesting place to visit, and I hope I'll get to visit it someday. And like what was said in my introduction, I'm from Stella Maris College in Chennai. And I hope all of you also get to visit the campus at Stella Maris sometime or the other. So I would like to congratulate the history department of the JMJ College for organizing this webinar. Always organizing an event has its own set of challenges, no doubt. And especially when things are online, technical issues, all of that becomes a big thing, right? And for the first time in my life, I heard the word webinar in 2020. I'm sure all of you also heard it for the first time that time. I remember in March 2020, I got an invitation to attend a webinar, and I was wondering, what is this word, webinar? And I'm sure all of you also felt the same. And that 1 month from March 2020 to April 2020, I think we encountered so much of change, right? So much of things that were different from the world that we knew it. And I'm sure a few months into the pandemic, I'm sure all of you also experienced this. All of you would have felt, the kind of changes that came into our world were something uh, quite shocking, right? Quite shocking. And I'm glad things are normal now, at least as far as the education scene is concerned. Students are back in the classroom. Thank goodness for that. But you have ideas like the webinar and all have become a part of the common scene because it's very convenient, right? Otherwise, how else will you get resource people who are outside your geographic space to come and interact with you? Right, so that's not possible. If you have to otherwise organize a faculty development program, and if it is in your college campus itself, it has a lot of challenges, no doubt. So you have webinars have come. Uh, it has become a part of the culture in the academic world. And though you had instructions, a lot of instructions were given to keep your audio muted at all times. Since we are a rather small group, no, I can see around 24 people, and I would be very happy if this session is interactive rather than just me speaking, because the topic as such, relevance of history, is something that concerns. I'm assuming everybody here is a historian. Is that true? Are the most of the people attending this webinar either studying history or professors of history? Can you have a Google Meet has this option of reactions also. So if you put a thumbs up, maybe you're agreeing to what I'm saying. A thumbs down could be. So is it that most of the people out here are historians? Yeah, okay. So one person has raised their hand. Okay, what about the others? I'm assuming everybody is a historian. Yeah, then I think we can have it as an open forum, because you have asked teachers of history, of any subject for that matter. You have, as we progress in life, there's so much of learning, there's also unlearning, right? In fact, I've been teaching history for more than 25 years, 27 years to be exact. And over these years, the way I teach history has changed a lot. So there's a lot of learning, unlearning, relearning. And every time I also have to attend sessions. Apart from being resource people for sessions, we attend sessions ourselves because our college itself organizes. In fact, this morning itself we had a session on evaluation patterns and things like that. And every time we meet, whether it's online or offline, there is some input we get by listening to other people. So I hope today's session, which is on the relevance, so your entire theme of the faculty development program was basically relevance of history, and I have chosen to link relevance of history to the pre-colonial and the colonial period, which we also call modern India, basically. And the reason I have chosen this period is because I have personally found it always very fascinating. Okay, so this period for me has been I mean, history generally is something that has always interested me, but I found a lot of things which exist in India today predate to this particular period. So that impact, the legacy of that age is very, very strong, and that's why I chose to speak with reference to this particular age. Okay. Now it has been said that if you have questions, you can write it in the chat, basically. But I have a PPT, and normally when we have a presentation, we cannot see any question which comes up in the chat. Okay, so I'll be very happy if you have a question. Please unmute. You can unmute and you can ask your question. That will be good. It'll be more interactive. That way, I also feel motivated to speak, right? So this is same like a classroom scenario. When we talk in class and our students respond by asking a lot of questions, we kind of feel inspired and motivated to talk more, and kind of give it a little more, some more inputs that we put in. Okay, so I request all of you all to feel free to unmute if you have a question, because I will be presenting, so the screen will kind of block my view and I will not be able to see questions which are in the chat. Can I get an okay from everyone? So if you have understood what I'm saying, maybe you can send up any emoji. Yeah, right. Thank you, Papia. Right. Okay. So we will get started. So I will present my screen now. Right. And as has been already told to you, basically I'm going to speak on the relevance of history, and I'm focusing more on what is called as the pre-colonial and the colonial phase of Indian history. Okay. Now, moving on, I would like to begin this FDP by posing a few questions, a few specific questions which are there. Okay, so these I have put down 5 questions. The first is, do we need history? Do we actually need history? Okay, most of us out here are history teachers, no doubt, or maybe we are students of history. But do we need history? Is it okay if countries don't have a subject called history, or history is removed? Because I'm sure you yourself would have experienced that in recent years there has been a lot of backlash, right? I don't know if you have experienced it, but you read so much in newspapers against historians, against history writers, against textbooks. There is a move in our country to rewrite textbooks. No, already it's there. You have in many states, history textbooks have been rewritten. Okay, so it brings us to this very basic question. Do we need history? Well, being a historian, I very vociferously say, yes, definitely we need history, right? How can we be without history? History has a very crucial role. So history is not just something about the past. It's not something that happened, thousands of years ago, and it belongs only to that era. It's not as if it doesn't have a relevance. It definitely has. And today's paper is all about trying to figure out what that relevance is. Okay, so as historians, and even otherwise, even if we're not historians, I think it is important for us to show the world that we definitely need history. Okay, history has a place which cannot be questioned. There is no negotiating that fact. So history is definitely required. Okay. And of course, for you and me, if history is not there, we don't have our jobs, right? Which would be very unfortunate. So for our sake, and I would say even for the larger sake of the world itself, history should continue to thrive and not really be threatened. Okay, right now, if you look at the scene in India, you might feel that maybe certain things are being threatened. History per se is being threatened. History, the way it was being written all these decades, is being threatened. Okay. Now, coming to the second question that I would like you to think about. By the way, my PPT, if any of you need it, I will, I'm willing to share this at the end of it. So if you feel, because these are things you could share with your students as well. Okay, so why do we need history? That comes to the second question. Okay, so the first thing we have said, yes, we need history. Now we come to the second question, why do we need history? Is there any need? Uh, can somebody from the group maybe unmute and answer? Is there anybody who would like to answer that? Why do we need history? So if we say we need history, why is it that we need history? Anybody? Okay, I think I cannot hear anyone. Well, history is something like what I said. It's not a dead letter. It's not something that happened way back, which does not have an impact on how life is today. In fact, how our life is today is very much linked to the history of the earlier period. Okay, so definitely there is a need for history. Now, coming to the third question, which I have posed, can history writing be completely objective? Generally speaking, with the writing of history, it is meant to be completely objective. In fact, good history is supposed to be completely objective. There is no room for subjectivity. Okay, that's how history is meant to be. It is supposed to be completely free of any kind of bias. But in actual writing of history, it's been shown. In fact, world's leading historians have said some element of subjectivity does come in. Okay, so it is not purely objective. In fact, 100% objective writing of history would be amazing. In fact, that's what the we want it to be. But you have some level of subjectivity does come in, because after all, historians are we are part we are products of our own the region, our experiences. So if we are, like, for instance, if most of you, I guess, are from Andhra. So if you're doing research on Andhra, in a way, it is very effective for you to do research because you understand that local culture really well. But some amount of your own likes and dislikes also comes into the writing. So will you be completely objective if you're writing something associated with your culture? May not happen. Okay, same thing for me. So being completely objective becomes a little bit of a challenge. Now the fourth question that I've put out here is, who should write history? Now you might say, why have I even put a question like that? No, who should write history? Obviously, historians should write history. But why I have put that question is because in recent years, the writing of history has been challenged. Historians in India, and it's not something that's unique to India. It's happened in other countries also. Okay, where the writing of history has been challenged. Okay, and we might say, why is it that people are questioning historians writing history? After all, if anybody has the best talent or the best understanding of history, it's a historian, right? They are trained in that. Like, nobody says, why is mathematics being done by a maths person? Obviously they are the experts in that. Why is it a physicist that's involved in physics? because that's what they do. That's what they're experts. So why is it that when it comes to history per se, why is it that everybody feels they know history? They know history even better than historians do, right? I don't know how many of you have had this feeling, but I've definitely experienced that. Some of the things that you see circulated on social media or things that are passed off as history, those are not really history, but nobody really believes that. Okay, so who should write history? And I would also like to mention at this point of time that I'm writing a research paper on the scientific writing of history. And with the permission of the organizers, I would like to share a link with you just to get your opinions on what you feel. What do you feel about government interference in the writing of history? Is it okay if the government decides what kind of history has to be taught in schools, in colleges? Okay, so all these are important points which which I feel definitely is something that we as historians should definitely discuss in class. Okay, now coming to the fifth question that I have put in my presentation. How should we teach history? How should we teach history? Uh, generally speaking, in fact, my own experience of how history was taught to me in school, and maybe I myself am guilty of it to some extent. Sometimes in our classrooms, with the teaching of history, we are focusing only on facts. Okay, so we tell our students a lot of facts, a lot of details about a certain age. We go into descriptions and things like that. But is that what history is all about? Or does history go beyond that? Does history go beyond those facts, beyond those events, to explain something larger? Okay, something that from which students or anybody learning about it can see a kind of a bigger picture of what really happened during a given age. Was it something good? Was it something bad? Was it something that we can learn from? In fact, that's what the role of history is meant to be. Okay, so I'll stop sharing for a bit. All right, so I have put forward 5 questions, okay, which I feel are very relevant. And maybe can I have a sharing from some of you? There are around 27 of you in this group. Something on how do you teach history? Do you enjoy teaching history? I'm assuming you're all history teachers, no? So, would you like to share? Do you enjoy teaching history? I definitely love teaching history. I didn't really have any specific plans when I was much younger in school that I would become a history teacher. It happened. It happened. Okay, but you have, if given a choice, definitely that is something I would have chosen. Definitely chosen, because I have no regrets in being a history teacher. And I have some opinions from all of you. Please, anyone. What do you feel? How do you think history should be taught? Like when we present facts to students, should we also help them, give them ideas beyond that, as in understanding that age itself? What were the actual achievements of this age? What were the actual limitations of this age? What did people experience? Because history is about recording the collective experience of people, isn't it? Can I have some reactions? Anybody would like to share? No? Okay, fine. That's fine. Okay, then I'll go ahead. Okay, so I'll go ahead. I'll move on to the next. Okay, so you have 1 minute. Okay, so Sudha has said multidisciplinary approach. Right, definitely. Okay, see, history cannot be learned in isolation. It definitely cannot be learned in isolation. It's linked to so much, right? It's linked to society, it's linked to economics, it's linked to politics, it's linked to governance, it's linked to law. definitely you have to, in approaching history, the teaching and learning of history, there has to be a multidisciplinary approach, definitely. So thank you, Sudha, for that. And Papya, I'm just reading your comment now. So you see, we need history, not for a historian. It needs an all criteria perspective. Any development work or critical thinking, definitely Papya. So history is not meant for historians. In fact, history is, it should be a must for everybody. Everybody should have a knowledge. It's not as if it's something that's meant only for historians, right? And the problem what we experience, like what in the question what I posed, who should write history, it is very unfortunate that many people, especially in Asian countries, I don't know if it's a phenomena all over the world, but especially in Asian countries, people don't have much knowledge of history, but they still think their knowledge of history is good enough for them to have an opinion, for them to say things, which becomes a little unfortunate. Okay. Uh, I feel that maybe even at the school level teaching of history, a kind of a different approach should be adopted. Okay, people should go beyond just those facts, beyond those figures, into understanding and help students develop that critical mind. In fact, that's what the purpose of education, not just history teaching, it's for education itself to develop, become a critical thinker, to really question things which are put forward as history or what is projected in a certain way. It's important that somebody questions that. Only then can we really have a vibrant society which which has a control over the government. Okay, otherwise the government does its own thing and people allow the government to do their own thing, which may not. History has taught us that that is a wrong approach. And when people distance themselves from the government and allow the government to do whatever it is doing, at some point of time there are problems, which and who suffers at the end of the day? It is the common man. Okay, so that level of critical thinking through our classroom teaching of history is very important. Okay, so those 5 questions which I have posed, I think this is something that all of us should ask as historians, as either students of history or teachers of history or writers of history. I'm sure all of us out here are doing good research on history. So these are things, these are pertinent questions which need to be asked. Okay, so I'll go back to my presentation now. Okay, I hope my screen is visible. So I move on to the next slide on what is history. Okay, so we have said, we have spoken about the need for it. So what is history? And I'm sure all of you at your master's level, you would have done a paper on historiography, right? So, and the one description on what is history that nobody forgets is E.H. Carr's, because it's so simple, right? E.H. Carr. His name also is interesting, Carr. So how you can't really forget that name, right? And his uh, description of history. So he says history is a dialogue. It's a dialogue. So it's like it's a conversation which is 2 ways. It's not just one person talking. Okay, so history is a dialogue between the past and the present. Okay, and it's an unending dialogue. So this dialogue did not take place when history was being written in medieval times or in ancient times or whatever. It continues even today, and it's going to continue right till the world is there. Okay, so till the world exists and beyond, this dialogue, which is essentially history, is going to exist. Okay, and he says it's the interaction between a historian and the facts. So when this basically is pertains to the writing of history, the writing of history, the scientific way in which history has to be written. Okay, so history has to be written in a very scientific way, but it is not a science like other sciences are, right? So it's not a science like maths, or it's not a science like any of the other sciences, computer science, for instance. Why history is not like that is mainly because it deals with human beings, right? It deals with people like you and me. Okay, so it is the story of human beings. And human beings are very unpredictable. Would all of you agree? So, human beings are unpredictable, though at some level we may all be the same. Okay, so at some level, every human being needs certain things, like our basic needs itself. Okay, our basic needs of roti, kapra, or makan, or our basic survival needs. Okay, all of us need that. All of us need a life of dignity, of respect. All of that is there. But beyond a certain point, we are impacted by our own upbringing, right? By our own personality. So some people are timid, they are okay with everything, they are tolerant towards everything, while there are others who are very, very assertive about what they want, or they can be very, very bossy. So human beings are different. And since history is a story of human beings, it cannot be a proper science like how other sciences. And it's a collective, it's not just one person's story, right? History is the collective experience of a society in a given age. Okay, so if that given age had experiences, it was recorded in different ways. So you have, that's a historian's job. So he has those facts. How does he understand those facts? How does he, represent those facts without bringing in his own bias? So to the best of his understanding, okay, how he is able to kind of link that. Okay, so when you say relevance of history, every age basically is very, very relevant. Okay, so it's not something that is over and done with and we can forget it and we can, push it aside and say that didn't exist. No, that's not how it is. Okay, and like what many of you may be aware of, the word history comes from the Greek word historia, which essentially means trying to look or find details. Okay, so it's inquiry, you investigate the life of people at a certain point of time, and based on that you create a body of knowledge. So that's history. Okay, and the Arab word for history is tariq or date, which refers to the chronology, how history has evolved. All right. I've also put in an image of E.H. Carr, because this is a name we are very familiar with, but I don't know if any of you have seen photos. So this is what E.H. Carr looks like. Okay, so E.H. Carr, a great thinker. So he's essentially British, and his ideas. Okay, so even today in the the writing of history and all that, we speak about his ideas in history. And he also says history is very subjective. Okay, it's very subjective, so you cannot really completely kind of de-link yourself from what you're writing. Okay, and at this point, okay, I'll stop sharing for a minute, and I would like to show you this particular book. Okay, so this particular book is something that I have been reading for the past month, and I've been using it for a research that I'm working on. So I've told you I'm writing this book, right? I'm writing a research paper on the writing of history itself. So this particular book, you can see the title, it says Pride and Prejudice. Okay, sorry, not Pride and Prejudice, Prejudice and Pride. Okay, so Pride and Prejudice we know is an English classic. Now this particular book, it's a book on history. It's an excellent book. Okay, and I recommend it to all of you. Okay, it's something that you should read. It's by Krishna Kumar. It's a research work done by Krishna Kumar. Who basically was a civil servant. He served as a civil servant, where he's compared history of the Indian national movement, how it is taught in India and how it is taught in Pakistan. So basically, the Indian national movement. Okay, so it's a story that you and me are very familiar with, right? So we have learned it in school, we have learned it in college. Maybe we are also teaching this paper. How many of you are teaching this paper, Indian National Movement, at present? Yeah, thank you, Rizwan. I'm just reading your comment now. Yeah, thank you. Yes, we definitely, it does help us create a better future, no doubt. How many of you, anybody in this group? Anybody in this group is teaching Indian national movement at present? Is there anyone who's teaching Indian national movement? No? Okay, fine, doesn't matter. Okay, so I'm just showing you how history is not always very objective. Okay, so in this book, Krishna Kumar has compared how Indian national movement is taught in India and how Indian national movement is taught in Pakistan. So technically speaking, if history is very objective, then it should have been the same textbook, right? So it should be the same story of how freedom struggle, because Pakistan was not born at that point of time, right? So Pakistan was very much a part of India. It's during that point of time that a split happens and a new country is born. But you will see the approach is very different, very different. Okay, so for you and me, in our history textbooks on the partition movement, Jinnah is shown in a very negative light, right? So he's shown as this person who was because he was very adamant about certain things, and because he didn't get the kind of support that he thought he would get in India, he became very insistent on the creation of Pakistan and things like that. And then how Iqbal is presented in Indian textbooks, and how he's presented out in the Pakistani textbook is very different. Okay, same thing like you have for them, they saw the whole movement as being very, very successful in kind of gaining an escape. For them, it was all about getting away. It was, if they had stayed on, life would have been something else, that kind of a thing. So the projection is very different. So this is what I'm trying to portray, things how they are presented, and this is something we have got to share with our students. Okay, we've got to help them understand that we cannot fight over history. In fact, history is becoming a battleground in India, right? I'm sure all of you, many of you would agree, it's becoming a battleground, and that's not what it's meant to be. That's not the purpose of history at all. Okay, it's not meant to be a place where people find faults and dig out things, as it's not a space for revenge at all. That's not the purpose at all. Okay, so this is a book I definitely would like to recommend. And in fact, a few years back, I was invited to address a group of women. So this session was organized by a women's organization which organizes events for expats in India. Okay, so that is foreigners living in India, and Chennai as a metro has a large number of consulates, right? So women married into to these people working in the consulates are part of this particular group. Okay, so I spoke to them. I gave them I spoke about the Indian freedom struggle basically, and it was an eye opener for them. They said, we didn't know all, so they were all women in their 40s, 50s, and they said all through our life, we believe that the British actually did India, they did, it was something very beneficial. The British rule was very beneficial to India. And Indians ought to be grateful to the British that they came and then they kind of transformed a very backward nation into a very civilized nation. Because what I spoke about was completely different, right? From their own understanding, their own perception. And that's how history of the colonial period is basically taught in Britain. So for them, it was a matter of great achievement. The fact that a tiny little island, which is almost 20 times smaller than the whole of India, and at the point when they came to India, India was one of the most richest, one of the richest. A very, very powerful empire was ruling at that point of time. In fact, at that point of time, it was the most powerful empire in the world. they came and they were able to transform that and subjugate a huge uh, geographical space into their own. So for them, it's a big achievement. Okay, they see it as the heydays of their empire. But for us, from our point of view, okay, so this is what we should understand, that there is a perspective in history, what we have to realize, and how we present it. So it's so any historical research, for that matter, is not, it's not like the ultimate. Okay, so there is always room for things that can be added to it. Okay, there are new ideas, there's always scope for more which can be done. All right, so I think I've been talking for quite some time now. Would you like to ask any clarifications before I move on to my next slide? Is there anything that you would like to clarify? Because if you have certain doubts or anything that you want me to be a little more, give you a little more explanation, I'd be happy to do that. Or is it okay? Am I with everybody? Are you able to get the gist of what I'm trying to say? Okay, so we are discussing the relevance of history. Okay, since I've not got any reaction as of now, I'll go back to my presentation. Okay, so the last thing that I showed you was E.H. Carr's picture. Now we move on to the next slide. Okay, so history, there is no doubt about how relevant it is to modern times, to our life itself. And as a person who has studied and read history for a very long time, I feel history gives us a better understanding of the world. I hope all of you agree with me. As historians, we are in a much better place than the common people, or maybe lawyers, maybe have some advantage over us, maybe, but I'm not very sure. But as history, because what do we do in history? We learn about how societies evolve, right? We learn about how civilizations are created, the problems they face, and how those problems help them change into something else. We learn about revolutions. We understand why revolutions came about, how were they resolved, what were the changes that came about. We understand society, like what I've said, history learning is all about. So some of you have also shared how definitely it has to be a multidisciplinary approach to it. Okay, so we learn so much. So we are in a much better position to really understand the world. Okay, in one of my later slides, I've said history teaches us political intelligence. Okay, so when you see what is happening in any country, it might be our country or it may be some other country, because of our own learning of history, we sometimes are able to make very intelligent guesses as to what can happen. Okay, that's why if you look at some of the national debates also on matters of election or whatever it is, historians are invited to kind of express themselves. So definitely history, uh, you know, creates all this in a much better way. Okay, so it helps us understand ourselves, it helps us understand other people, it helps us understand change, then in being good citizens. In fact, this is many of the countries in South Asia, and South Asia is one geographical space, or even Far East for that matter, where a lot of emphasis is placed on the role of history to kind of make you into a good citizen. Okay, so history is taught with the idea of making you very patriotic, in creating in you a love for your country and things like that. Okay, though I wouldn't say that's the only purpose. I would say that it's not just a citizen, right? It's not just being a good citizen. It's to make us a good human being. I think that is more important. Okay, because sometimes being a good citizen, okay, that is there, but it is like an overt ultra nationalism, which not always is a good thing. I'm sure all of you have enough experience of politics and all of that to know that sometimes all those things can be really dangerous, right? So it helps us analyze and explain problems. All right, so I'll keep moving on to the next slide. Okay, so this is something I've already explained. So we understand, okay, we understand how societies have evolved. So we are able to see how things are happening and why it's happening the way. Like, for instance, our Indian constitution, for that matter. As uh, as historians, we've understood how the constitution came about, right? Why is it that certain things had to be part of our constitution? We understand it better than most of the other people. Okay, so history gives us that advantage. Okay, and I think this also is something that I've already explained. Now, this is a very important factor. The fact that the relevance of history is basically about giving us a sense of identity. Okay, what is identity? Identity is knowing the kind of background we come from. Okay, so I identify myself as an Indian, maybe a South Indian. Okay, so that sort of thing. Okay, so we understand our roots, and this whole thing of idea of identity and belonging is something very, very important in history, and that's why you have many countries place importance to the study of history. Okay, because it gives people a sense of identity. Okay, and something what I find very relevant as far as the teaching and learning of history is, we are able to explain, like, for instance, even today, so that we have a war happening in between Ukraine and Russia, right? We know there is a historical context to it, or this the war between Israel and Palestine. Okay, we know there is a how it has evolved, what were the reasons why it has come about. Okay, and in our learning of some of the big major events, okay, like for instance the world wars, we're able to understand, okay, what was it that led to these very devastating wars. Okay, what is it, how did it impact the world? Okay, our understanding of fascism. Okay, how did fascism as a mode of ruling come about? Okay, how did totalitarian governments come about? What was this, what kind of led to the creation of such kind of governments, or a military dictatorship, as we see in imperial Japan, and Japan coming into the war? And also we are able to understand, and we are able to also see if there are any parallels to it in the present world. you know so, is there any guarantee that there won't be fascist governments ever more in the world? Is there any guarantee that there won't be totalitarian governments anymore in the world? As historians, we know there is. It's a big possibility. It's a threat. It's a threat. Other people may not be aware of that threat, but because we have such an in-depth knowledge of what has happened in the world, what is happening, we definitely have that knowledge. Okay, so the next thing is political intelligence. I've already spoken about it. That makes it very relevant. Then morals and values. Okay, so history is very inspiring. I personally I found a lot of inspiration from personalities, from thinkers, you know, who have who had a vision way beyond what their societies projected. And there's so much, so we learn so much. Okay, and it has an impact on our own attitude towards many things in life. Okay, so definitely history teaches us. Uh, Morals, values. Okay, I'll skip this because I think I've already spoken about that. Okay, we learn and we are able to see if there are some parallels in society right now. Okay, and what maybe as uh, teachers of history, we want our students to move on towards very good careers. No, so that's what every teacher wants, that our students should be able to go on into something really good. And I feel history, though when it comes to choosing of history as a subject in college, I don't know how things are in Andhra, but generally speaking, I know the emphasis is so much on you know commerce, right? Commerce, it's in commerce, and you get into big companies and things like that. But I feel the teaching of history really helps a person develop the skills of critical thinking. So if history is taught in the right way, and this is something that we've got to ensure as teachers of history, that we don't limit our classroom discussion to only the facts. We have to look beyond that. We have to teach students to analyze and to see if things could have been different. Okay, so critical thinking, problem solving, understanding of cultures, all this makes students of history much better placed in order to be successful in many careers. And some of the careers which seem to kind of lead up from history, I would say, from my own experience as a teacher, many of my students have moved on to very, very successful careers in law. Okay, so they study the history and then they go to an LLB, and they're very successful, because I think knowledge of history, without knowledge of history, you cannot really be a good lawyer. It's a kind of a basic thing that you need to have. Then coming to governance itself, okay, so whether you are at a state level government, governance, or at the central level, for governance, definitely history. You have to know your country, right? You have to know the society. You have to know how things have evolved. Otherwise, how else will you do that? Many of my students have become journalists, and very good journalists at that, academicians, archaeologists, museologists, careers in tourism, as entrepreneurs. So there's virtually nothing that you cannot move into through history. Okay, so I think all of you, and I think this is something we should tell students when they join itself. Okay, that this is something important. They need not feel that they have taken something that is not as demanding, maybe, but that's because society doesn't understand. But we as historians have to put that message forward, and we keep doing it. Okay, and if we are able to uh, kind of translate our passion, our understanding, our love for it to our students, if we are able to kind of inspire them towards it, then definitely we would be doing our role as very effective history teachers who help students move on to go to some very, very, very lucrative and very satisfying careers. Okay. Now, this is something I would like to share with you. So, we are all actually living histories, right? Each of us has our own history, our own culture, the language, everything is something that we have inherited from the past. So, every human being basically is a living history, okay? Now, I come to this next slide, which I feel is very important. So, I hope all of you would pay attention. Now, I don't know how many of you are aware or have heard of this, but essentially speaking, there are two types of history. Okay, one is, of course, we have kind of delineated history as political, cultural, social. All that is different, but otherwise, in a normal space, in the given understanding, there are two types of history: academic or professional history, popular or street history. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing because I just want to know if any of you have heard this. Have any of you heard these terms? Academic history, popular history. Is there anybody that is attending this webinar who have heard these terms? Academic history and popular history. I myself didn't hear it for a long time. Okay, so this is something that I became acquainted with in the course of my research and reading a few years ago. And I feel that every historian should be aware of it. Okay, so what is academic or professional history? Well, academic or professional history is the type of history that you and I, we as historians, the type of history that we engage in in our classrooms, be it in schools, be it in colleges. So our history teaching is based on books, which are based on proper research, right? So we know all of you are familiar with historiography, right? So you know there are certain rigors of the trade. So in writing history, you just can't write anything and everything, right? You have to follow certain rules, and otherwise it's not good history at all. Okay, so what you and I indulge in is what is called as academic or professional history. But what we should be aware of is that there is something that is popular history or street history. Okay, what is this popular history? Well, this popular history is history that we find in novels, history that we find in movies. Okay, so movies also, are on history, right? It's the kind of history that is circulated through social media. I'm sure all of you have read a lot of things on different aspects of history. So that is projected as real history. So this is, I'm sure, I don't know, I've come across a lot of messages saying this was the history that was never taught to you in school. So it is like accusing historians, no? So when they are circulating, some history is being circulated in social media saying this was a history that was never taught to you in school. It is like putting the blame on historians, saying that we have changed history, or we are presenting a certain wrong factors in history. Okay, that's why you have not come across this. So all these kinds of things, a very superficial level of history which is not based on proper research is what is projected as history. And what is very unfortunate, I would say again, this is mainly in countries of Asia. Normally, people accept that as history. So they go watch a movie. Okay, I'll give you one example. I don't know how many of you have seen the movie of Padmavat. Did anybody go and watch that movie? Anybody in this group has watched that movie, Padmavat, or any other history movie? So you go watch that movie and you come back believing that only was history. But there are so many historical errors in that movie, right? In fact, that whole story is it's a figment of a writer's imagination. The whole, the legend of Padmavat itself is based on, it's a creative thing. But you try to tell that to people, no, they see it that as their history. So when a historian writes something more academic, they say, no, this is not history. Okay, so that is popular history, right? And this popular history has a lot of dangers. Why? Because it's also the history that is presented by politicians. If you listen to the speeches, of politicians, they'll talk about historical events. And one thing about history is you cannot quote things out of context. History happened within a context, and that context is something very important. Within the circumstances, somebody said something or somebody did something. It was meant for that context. You can't take it out of that context so many centuries later and say so and so was wrong, so and so is to be blamed, so and so is labeled like this, so and so. I'm not going to the details of all this because it will become a political debate, and I don't think this is the space for that. Okay, but I think you are able to understand what I'm trying to say. Okay, so now there is a kind of clash. Okay, so on the one hand, you and me are concerned with proper research, with an academic professional history, okay, which is how history should be. But what is being understood in the common space in the country is a different kind of history, okay? And this whole controversy which has come about on rewriting. Yes, you're right, Rizwan. Yes, it's very, very superficial, very peripheral, historical. There's no research, there's no proper research which goes into the making of films. Because, films and books, they're not trying to build a body of knowledge. They're only trying to entertained, right? They're only trying to make money, right? So for them, it is, let's tell a very, very, kind of, a story which is very interesting, has a lot of gossip in it, lot of masala, lot of elements for excitement, and only then it'll sell, right? But what the kind of impact it has on us as historians is, people believe that is the truth. People believe that's the truth. So what is actually being discussed in classrooms is kind of being negated, being pushed aside. Okay, so we cannot change the entire world. They are not going to listen, and I think politicians have been very effective in India in kind of projecting historians as villains. I don't know how many of you had this feeling past several years that historians in India are now the villains, politicians are the good people. So they have been very successful. Unfortunately, we have been very quiet. We have not countered that. Okay, we have not countered that what we are projecting is actually the truth. Okay, and what politicians are doing it's only for an agenda. Yeah, right. Yes. Yeah, you're right. Jodha Bhai has got currency. True. So things are projected because there is a certain agenda. Okay. So how do we? So maybe we cannot go and fight our politicians because we don't know how that will be impacted. But within our own classrooms, I would say we are the queens, right? The kings and the queens. So at least the young minds, the students who come, the students have an open mind. At least we teach them what is right and wrong. And step by step, this idea has to grow. Okay, this idea has to grow. Yes, it is a Herculean task. We have a lot of work that we've got to do, but we have to be aware, okay, and we have to beware. Okay, aware and beware. Okay, otherwise, even before we know it, yeah, the whole carpet is pulled under from below our feet, and the whole of history as it is. And we know some of the most respected historians in our country have been facing a lot of flack. They've been labeled as this and labeled as that. Okay, basically, they're being projected as people who cannot be trusted. But is that how it is meant to be? Okay, because historical writing, there is a purpose. See, one thing is the last word in history has not been said. I think we have to be very clear about that. Okay, so whatever research, whatever topic, yes, there is still scope for new ideas to come in the light of new evidence or whatever. Okay, but like what I said before, history cannot become a battle on the streets. We cannot take things out of context and project it in a certain way. Okay, but we see that happening. Okay, so at least in our own classrooms where we have control, and if obviously we have called to debate on matters like this, and I'm glad I'm speaking to historians. So this thing is something we have to be aware of and really take it seriously. So in the research what we write, okay, in what we present in class, let's be very clear about it. It's the historian who is an expert on writing history. And if anybody is going to be honest with the writing of history, you can trust the historian more than you can trust a politician, right? I think people should have that common sense that historians are more to be trusted than politicians. So we have to somehow get that message across. Okay. Can I have any reactions from anybody? Anybody would like to add to what I'm saying? If you have any point. Now there are many historians who have shared this on various forums, but if you look at the history congresses, there's a lot of hot debate going on what is happening in the political space and the threats that historians are facing. Any opinions? Yeah, I completely accept what Rizwan's saying about Jodhabai, how that is being projected and how, in fact, politicians are taking mileage out of it. They're riding piggyback on certain leaders just for their own gains. Okay, but unfortunately, the common man is getting fooled. The common man is getting fooled. Okay, so I think I'm exceeding time. We have time till 5:30. So I'll go back to my presentation. Certain aspects of it I might just skip 1 minute. Okay, so so this aspect of academic and popular history is definitely something that we have to be aware of. Okay, so we have to be aware that in the political space it is being done with a political agenda, and we have to be able to counter that in some way. Okay, now I'm just kind of presenting some of these works of historical fiction, or what you could call as popular history. So this is one, but here in these particular books, these books are written by people with excellent research. So they are not typically history books. They are books what you could call as popular fiction or historical fiction. Okay, and Kushwant Singh, I don't know how many of you have read this very, very beautiful book on Train to Pakistan. Excellent uh, research that he did on the days of the partition and what went into it, the travails. It's still something, the horrors, and one of the dangers of this communal feelings which are coming in India is maybe you have in future we could see that kind of communal hatred what was created during the time of our partition. Maybe it could come back, and that's a real danger. And we as historians are aware, but what about the people otherwise? Then you have this book on White Mughals by William Dalrymple. Again, it's a very engaging book based on good research, but at the same time where the element has been to entertain rather than to teach history, unlike the history textbooks. And Amitabh Ghosh, amazing writer again. And I refer to this particular book in the teaching of pre-colonial and colonial India because the entire premise of the story is based on that particular age. And I think it is a masterfully well written book of popular fiction that I would encourage all of you to read and also share in your classroom. Okay, so in fact many of my students, when I read excerpts from this, they go ahead and pick up these books, and then they come back to me and say it's been such an amazing learning. Okay, now why is it that I've chosen to speak on pre-colonial and colonial India? Like what I said in the beginning, this period I feel has a lasting legacy. Okay, like the fact that you and me are talking in English itself, right? So the lingua franca of of Indians. Though of course we can't say all Indians know, but it is still considered something very important in India. If you are to get a good job, a well-paying job, if you want to be part of the global scene, you need to know English and all that. And how did that come about? Well, did come about with the coming of the Europeans um, to this country. Okay, and many of the problems that we are still grappling with, okay, like have not been resolved, right? So a lot of problems which have been there are linked to colonial India. I would like this as a discussion rather than me speaking. Okay, so I feel that like for instance, environmental problems that India faces, that big industries, polluting industries which, on that big mega scale, all of that was brought in by Europeans, right? Though India didn't really experience an industrial revolution per se, we were at the receiving end because all those big industrialists who saw India as a huge market came and set up shop here. And in the process, our resources got depleted. Okay, so that's something that has come from the colonial period. Now, you have several decades ago, this debates on colonialism, blaming the British for everything was very fashionable stuff, right? But no longer. If you look at new trends, new debates, and the whole thing. No longer. Yes, definitely the British presence and the establishment of the British Raj per se uh, transformed our nation beyond what it was, but in some ways it awakened us and maybe kind of moved us a little faster towards what we call as the modern age in the sense of our exposure to a liberal kind of an education, okay, as being different from a religious kind of an education, our exposure to different kinds of ideas, our exposure to concepts of equality, liberty, fraternity. All of this came in with the colonial education that started. And for all the women out here who are part of this FDP, the real beginning of women's emancipation begins during the colonial period, right? So a lot of the legislations that exist in India today can be traced, the beginnings of that can be traced to the colonial period. Our constitution itself is something that has kind of it's it's a legacy of that age. All right. So these are some of the points that I would like to kind of discuss. I'll stop sharing, and if you have any opinions, I'll be really happy uh, with what you would like to say. Okay. So Sudha, sorry, 1 minute. Let me see. I think some comments have come. Uh, That's right. So there is a lot of political interference in history. And what is distressing for us as historians is that the common public don't seem to be bothered, no? They seem to have bought the line of the government that history, the way it was written in India, was wrong. Okay, so historians have been, like what I said, the villains. They have written a wrong history. They have kind of projected history as being glorious only under certain, spheres, and certain parts of our history have been blackened. So that is a period that is not meant, and in many states, certain aspects of our history have been removed altogether. We don't know when that's going to come to our states. We don't know. Tamil Nadu, Andhra, we are a little more progressive, I would say, in terms of understanding history. But we don't know. Maybe we will also be faced with a future like this. Okay, so political interference in history, definitely there's a lot of distortion. Okay, and things, the way it's projected, it's projected in a very wrong way, and it's projected in a way that's once again this the communal. For so many decades we try to kind of calm it down. India had a very brutish partition, right? For the millions who died, for the millions who lost their homes, lost everything, it was all a result of communalism. Okay, and because of that, the horrors of communalism, there was so much of a need to spread a secular feeling, respect for each other. Okay, so history is not my history versus your history. If Indian history gets divided like that, as my history versus your history, the only thing that will come about in our future is wars, trouble, bloodshed. Is that what we want for our country? Is that what we want? Definitely, we don't need that, right? Okay, now Sudha has said can connect with historian Romila Thopper, posturing against this present trend. That's right. So Romila has been at the receiving end of a lot of flack. Many other very respected historians have also been facing that. Okay, so serious historians are confused. Yes, they're very confused with the ongoing trends. Okay, and nobody seems to be asking us anymore, right? Nobody's telling us, nobody's taking our opinions at all. And only certain people who have proven themselves as being falling into a certain agenda of an extreme right, so they are being looped into this whole project of rewriting history. Okay, and we don't know within NEP becoming compulsory whether a standardization, or a certain different kind of history, different from what we have been learning, is going to be insisted upon. Okay, now I'll just take a break, and I would also like to share the link. Okay, uh, thank you so much, Rizwan. Thank you so much. And I really hope that you take these discussions, because these are very, very valid things. We have our limitations because of the political climate in our country, but I think we should not be very quiet about certain things, right? So it is our space. It is our space. And as trusted historians, we've been doing so much work where we really try to look at things very objectively. Government interference is something that should not be tolerated. If we can get this message across in schools, in colleges, among educated people, among people who understand, I think it would make a world of difference. Okay, just give me a minute, and I would like to share my link, and I would kind of request you to try and fill this whenever you can. Okay, so this is a research that I'm doing with a former professor of mine, Dr. Radhika Lakshman, who is a professor of history in Kuwait. Okay, so she teaches in Kuwait, and like many of you who are attending this webinar, she's also very distressed with what is happening with the political interference that's taking place in historical writing, and we are trying to project a very objective view on how history is something that does not deserve political interference. In fact, all this political interference, politicians are doing it with a certain agenda, right? But they don't look at it long term. They're looking in terms of only capturing votes. Okay, we are only looking in terms of capturing votes. But ultimately, what is the impact that it's going to have on our society? Society is getting polarized to such a great extent. There's so much of divisionism that's happening now, and it is very, very distressing. Okay, now so if all of you can take some time and fill in that form, I'll really be happy. Okay, so it'll give your opinion, and I'd be very happy if you could also share it with your students. I'm sure you have many students who have. Yes, please, Avanti, please go ahead. What would you like to ask? Avanti, I think you've raised your hand. Would you like to ask something? Okay, so I think maybe that's a mistake. Maybe she didn't mean to raise her hand. But I feel that's a real challenge. And coming to this impact of the pre-colonial period, or the modern India, what we call it, I feel it's a very, very significant age. And though India went from being a very wealthy country, but of course the wealth was not really equally distributed. That is something that's a disadvantage that we've had in our country. It was always in the hands of a limited few, whether they were rulers or nobles, aristocrats. And here again, today again, it's not an equitable distribution of wealth, but still definitely things are better. Okay, you have a lot of things what we understand as being part of the modern way of life itself came in with the colonialists. So I feel it's a very significant period which has a huge impact on how life is. Okay, now I have a lot of things which are there in my presentation, but I think I can skip a whole lot of that. I'll go back to my presentation. Do you have any questions? Anything that you would like to ask at this point of time? Anything that you would like to clarify? Otherwise, I'll go back to my presentation, and I think it's going to be 5 o'clock. It's going to be 5 o'clock. and we are expected to wind up by 5:30, right? But have all your sessions been right up to 5:30? How has it been? I think you've, uh, you know, this is the sixth day of your session, right? And I think the professor who spoke to you on the first day, Dr. Sudhakar, he happens to be my PhD guide. And so he was telling me not to become too theoretical and to have open it out to discussion. So I don't want to go too much into the session per se. Okay, but I would like to end with one particular quote of Manu Pillai, which maybe I will present to you. 1 minute, just hold on. Okay, so I'll move on from this particular thing. And yes, so these are the challenges that we face as historians. Okay, so history has become an area of contention. So people are fighting over history, and I've told it's meaningless to fight over history. It's really meaningless. Okay, history is not meant to be fought over. History is something that we've got to learn from. Okay, history gives us a lot of lessons, an understanding of the problems people have encountered earlier in the world. Okay, and these kind of things keep coming back. So that's why they say history repeats itself, right? And the reason why it's not a very simplistic, unidimensional thing is because it's not a single story. History is a compendium, it's a kind of many stories together which come into it. And now that you're aware that there is also this popular history, in our historical research, I think to some extent we have to give some space for it. I think it would improve our credibility as historians, where, of course, our academic way of writing history is there, but there are issues which I think we need to address, okay, which we definitely need to address to the challenges. Okay, so sometimes these long questions, there are a lot of assumptions, a lot of assumptions. People understand history as being something, okay, and then we are projecting it in a different way. Maybe, things like that are questions. So, as historians, we face a lot of challenges. And what is our role? Okay, what is our role as professional historians? One is, I think, we should be very dispassionate. It's very difficult to be dispassionate. We tend to get, emotionally involved in certain things. But that is something we've got to avoid as historians. So if we are going to be a good historians, we have to have some amount of detachment, because when you get emotionally involved, very passionate about a certain thing, then our own rationality gets, we are not able to think straight, right? I think this is a limitation. Every human being, when we get emotionally involved in something, we cannot think straight. So if to be rational and make sense of what we are trying to convey, I think we have to be very dispassionate. Okay, and we should teach students to think about history as open to interpretation. This is something that is very important. Okay, so the final say, oh, so it's not there. Let's learn. Let's learn from uh, what things are. And I feel Indian history has advantage of variety of lot of local, regional places. But at the same time, we should have that transnational understanding of what history is. It's very important for us to link all of this. Okay. Now you have. Okay, now how do we deal
Hello?
with? Yes, sorry, is anyone trying to say something? Okay, maybe I'll open it out to questions a little later. Let me finish. I just have 2 slides left. Okay, so how do we, kind of enter into debate with people who have their own view of the past? They've already decided this is how it is. And they are not willing to listen, even though your work may be based on a lot of research. They say no. this is the history, this is how my culture understands it, I'm not open to anything else. We have many people in India who have that closed mind, no? So how do we as historians deal with it? We've got to come up with it in our research, okay? So Niladri Bhattacharya was, as part of her research, she was pointing out that historians should try and shape the popular imagination. So it's something that we've got to also listen to people, okay, the voices of people expressing themselves. So in our history, we cannot stick to the traditional way of looking at only certain kinds of sources where we are, like we know for sure is authentic. So in our own historical research, for us to get greater credibility in a country where historians are being questioned, I think we have to also open up a little to the voices of others, as in like how do they express, how do they understand, okay? And I would like to end with this quote of Manu Pillai, who I feel is, has done a lot of good work in recent times on history and is a very articulate historian. Okay, so as the only way we historians can counter, see, politicians tend to be very articulate and they're able to connect with the common people, while we historians somehow are living in a kind of an isolated tower where we are not connecting, we are not conversing with actual people. Okay, so when we have a lot of junk circulating, I think we've got to counter that. We have to be able to reach across. So he says we live in times when history is polarizing. Okay, so there's so much of divisionism which has come about in Indian society. Okay, and some people have begun to look at history as an instrument of vengeance. It's time to take revenge. 2000 years back, your community, your religion was responsible for all these sufferings against my culture, my people. So now it's time. So, how, so I don't think history is a platform for vengeance. If history is a platform for vengeance, then I think it's going to be killing, and at some point of time one group or the other will have an advantage. Okay, so group one may have an advantage now, but 50 years from now, 100 years from now, group two will have an advantage. So are we going to keep taking revenge for something that happened in the past, or do we look for something beyond that? Okay, but I think this is something that is very, very significant what Manu Pillai says. What is history for? History is to draw wisdom. So history is not to draw fury and rage. So we don't look at what happened, 1,000 years ago and get very angry and rebel. That was an age, right? You cannot compare that age to the present age. That age had its own challenges, okay? So we have to draw wisdom. We have to avoid, so things what happened in the past, mistakes from the past, it's about for us to learn from that, okay? So we have to draw wisdom, not use that historical knowledge to create fury and anger and talk about revenge. Definitely not. Then history is, it's definitely it's going to be a battlefield, right? It's a battlefield which will go on unendingly. Okay, so what is history? It's a mosaic of experience, right? So from the stories of the past, it's a collective experience. And what is it meant to? It's meant to nourish us. You have to remember that without veneration. We don't have to venerate saying this age was glorious and all. Not at all. We learn from that age. Okay, we learn from that age. It has to enrich us. Okay, because a lot of what we are is from the past. But yet again, we have to make choices, okay? Because the age what we are living in is also faced with challenges. It's not that it's all a very rosy picture, right? There are challenges, there are difficult situations that we are also going through at present, okay? So that is what history is meant for, okay? To draw inspiration, to nourish us, and not use history as a vengeful thing, to kind of hit out against communities, hit out against people, for what people imagine. Obviously, the people of this age were not guilty of the past, right? Can we look at it that way? Not at all, right? So there is something that is history has a different purpose altogether. All right, so I think I've been talking for quite a while now, and I'd really like to thank you all. You've been very patient, and some of you have interacted. I'm very happy about that. And I would like to remind you that as historians, we are basically custodians of a very important repository of knowledge. Okay. So we cannot be sidelined. We should not allow ourselves to be sidelined. And we have to make people aware of the kind of world they are living in. What are the dangers we face when certain kinds of trends happen? So we are the torch bearers for the future. So let's not kind of think that we really don't have a very crucial role to play. We definitely have a very crucial role to play as historians. So through our research, through our teaching, and I think we have to go beyond that and interact with people, get them to listen, counter the distortions that are taking place. We have to do it. Okay? And I think if each historian takes on that task, there are different ways in which we can do it. No, but we have to do it. Let's not just sit and think maybe things will change. Can we sit us around and think that things will change? If we allow things to happen the way they are, then maybe we are kind of worse things will happen, right? Worse things could happen. So we have to make known that our role as historians is very important, and history is as relevant today as it always was, and it will continue with its relevance. But we've got to take the right kind of wisdom from history. Okay, it's and not approach it the way sometimes it is approached by certain elements of our society. Okay, so I have stopped sharing. Stopped sharing. And if you have any questions now, if you would like me to clarify something, I've not gone into too much of technical detail because it is difficult. I know as teachers, we've got used to talking, right? We love hearing our own voices now. It's very difficult to sit quietly and listen. So I know there is a capacity to which you could, but I hope my sharing has been useful to you, and I hope some bit of what I've tried to convey has will have an impact on you. Thank you so much. Thank you. If you have any questions, you can go ahead and ask. If there are any questions.
Dear participants, can any one of you ask Madam a question? I think they are all tired, right? Yeah, it is also the time for, evening time. So it's time for tea and relaxation. So thank you so much. I think some of you all have put some very nice comments that I'd like to, save for my own satisfaction that I have been able to convey something. So thank you. Thank you, madam, for your outstanding presentation on relevance of history with reference to the pre-colonial and colonial India. We are grateful to you for your availability to share your valuable thoughts and insights with us, madam. Thank you once again, madam. I would like to propose a vote of thanks. My heartfelt thanks to the correspondent, principal, today's eminent speaker, Dr. Dolly Thomas, and all the participants for your valuable participation in the sixth day of the webinar. I also thank technical team for their support to conduct the webinar successfully. Finally, I wholeheartedly thank all the participants for their active participation. Before winding up the webinar, I would like to make a few announcements to all the participants. Feedback form will be sent to chat box and WhatsApp group also. All those who are attending the webinar and filling up the feedback every day will be receiving the e-certificate at the end of 1 week national webinar come FDP. So once again, I thank you all for making this 6th day webinar very effective and successful. Hope to meet you all for the last day of the webinar tomorrow. Thank you one and all. Thank you, madam.
Yeah, thank you so much, Aruna. Thank you all, and I hope we get to meet, or maybe not a webinar, an actual, maybe at some history congress, and I definitely would love to interact with all of you. Thank you so much.
Sure, madam.
Thank you, Mrs. Janama, and the entire faculty team at JMJ College. Thank you for the opportunity. I really enjoyed interacting with all of you. Thank you so much.
So much, ma'am.